Okay. Good morning. This is Kevin Mamajek. I'm here to welcome you to the webinar. This is my first webinar, so everybody in the room is hiding their heads. So everybody that's listening hopefully is laughing. But we're here to talk about how to create mobile PX pages. What a way to start off a webinar, right? So we are going to do it a little different this time. We're going to do 30 minutes, and I'll give a little demo, and then we'll have probably about uh, 10, 15 minutes at the end to do Q&A through the chat or the Q&A manager of this webinar. So with that, I won't show any slides. We're going to just kind of dig right into Workbench and take a look at how we can create a responsive PX page. So let me share my Workbench, and we'll kind of walk through how we can create this PX page. So this is kind of like a cooking show, wouldn't you say, Logan? I've got some stuff already done to kind of give you the example because we don't want to spend too much time in the creation, but I'll give you enough in Workbench that you'll understand the concepts of creating that responsive page. So I have a series of stages that I'll walk you through, and we'll kind of walk through each one. But when you create a responsive PX page, we have to kind of set it up so that the scroll pane is the root. By default in Niagara 4.6, that is the default, but previous versions it was not. So why we need to have a scroll pane, I'll show you, because as these things shrink down to small size screens, we need to be able to accommodate the vertical scrolling. Not necessarily horizontal, unless you'll see some other features within Niagara that will do that, but it will allow it to flow. The next thing would be to add a flow pane. And this is the actual pane that we're familiar with, but we've actually updated it to be responsive. This is actually the magic that takes the responsive panes and moves them around into a display. And all this will make sense when I start to show you how this works. So how we find the new responsive pane is in the Baja UI. Down here, there is an example folder that is responsive, and it talks about columns, you know, a 4x1 or a 2x2, and I'll show you how that is calculated because we're going to actually do a three block column. So you have those examples that we can go through, and again, I won't go through them individually. We are making a tutorial, an online tutorial that will walk you through all those pieces. But the pane that I'm after, right, is this responsive pane. So in that responsive pane, I've already added a canvas pane. And what I'm going to kind of bring up to you is this canvas pane is 300 by 100. Now, when I first started creating these responsive PX pages, I couldn't visualize how big the blocks would have to be. So if you target the smallest screen that you're going to encounter, maybe an iPhone, you need to think about how big these blocks will fit, how big that size will be. So what I found is a 300 wide or width canvas pane is just enough to fit exactly on an iPhone 5S. All right, and so let me show you some of the things that I had to do to actually figure some of that out. So what I recommend is when you first start messing around with scroll panes and responsive panes is you just create a block, and we'll show you how to duplicate it, and create it a size, and then you can actually see the behaviors when I start to scroll around, right? So you'll see how the boxes snap back and forth. That's the responsiveness working with the pane and the flow pane. But what I did is I just created some samples just so I can experiment with different sizes. So at the top here for my header, I have a 200 by 100 block. Where I'm going with that is you need to come up with the size width that you want to have as a single column on a particular device. And then anything after that small size, it will just accommodate by putting the next block next to it on a larger size and so forth. So let's go back to the example where I'm going to go to stage 1. So I'm going to put some content on my my PX page here. So let's take a look at the individual pieces. So here I have a canvas pane inside that responsive pane. It's a size of 300 by 100. right? So that, like I said, fits onto a iPhone 5S. We're going to take a look at these scale factors later, but there's a new feature in 4.6 that allows us to actually control how small or how large a graphics or a canvas pane becomes. So before, we couldn't control that, and somebody could take an element and zoom it super big and or super small. So here we want to take a look at, we can set those minimum and max, and then we're familiar with setting that to fit to ratio. For this instance, I'm going to leave them all zeros because we're going to show you how these boxes will move around. Now, since this is responsive and I've designed this, I'm going to actually go ahead and duplicate this. I'll do it with the menu so you can watch, just so that I can get a couple blocks on the screen. So one of the things that I knew ahead of time was that I wanted to have 3 blocks in a row. So essentially I took the max width of 100 and divided it by 3, and so I want each of these blocks to take up 33% of that row. That also gives us the padding in between. So it knows that I should only have 3 on that row, but it also fills in the appropriate spaces, right? So if we come over here, I've got to do one thing I have to show you. So in a responsive pane, you have this feature called Force New Row. This is important. So when I tried to have these snap and move along, they all didn't, because each one of the ones that I just duplicated was a Force New Row. So this is one of those things you'll learn the hard way, just like I did in my example. So if you notice now, if I go and say, don't force new row for those other 2 blocks, now all of a sudden they become responsive, right? It's going to say, okay, fit as many as you can on that row, and then move the others up onto that second row when there's space available. And then the percentage keeps the padding associated so that all 3 of those blocks are always the same. Okay, so that's just a little bit about how to take the flow pane and adding those responsive panes. And by the way, you're going to get a lot of these, because I'll show you an example that I'm building out now, where you're going to want to move these around, right? This might be in the wrong order. So this takes it to the top, this takes it to the bottom. You can move it up 1, right? So as you move things around and duplicate these things, you'll end up using these buttons a lot more when you're trying to rearrange how you want the order to be. All right, so let's take a look at doing some, let's create like a label. So I'm going to go and create another responsive pane, drop it in there, and what I'm going to do here is create a label for the content. And this might be building status. And what we want, actually, what we want here is change the font to something huge. Change the background, foreground. And now, what just happened, right? I have a responsive pane that has the new line set to false. So if I double click that, say I want that to be on its own line, then we're going to get a block that's on the next line. But now we're kind of small, right? So I want to double click that and say that I want the preferred width not to be the preferred, but I actually want it to be 100% of the row. Oops, not 1,000, 100. And then we say OK, and then that actually displays out like a header, and then we can move that up to the top, right? So that's just another way of doing a responsive header. Now, down here, a lot of times we do a label like that for an address. If I say word wrap true, that also will word wrap that as the columns get smaller. Okay, so a lot to ingest, but this is the idea behind responsive. You cut up the page into little blocks so that those blocks can flow depending on the size of the screen that we view them on. So I'm going to go ahead and move to the next stage, which is I have 3 different pieces of content. Actually, I'm going to go to this stage, right? So here I have 3 different pieces of content that we were just showing, and I duplicated them, and then I just added in some alarm counts and some other things to give it some unique pieces here. Let me get a drink of water. And so what I want to show you here is in 4.6, we've also taken a lot of the display components and widgets and made them responsive as well. So in this typical thing, in this alarm responsive page, we might want to show that, yeah, there are no critical, but we also might want to list out the alarms. And so what we can do, if we look at the next one in my stage, is I'm going to actually add a alarm widget. We'll come down here and look at that. Has no content. So I'm going to scroll through my station, go to my alarm services, and then there's that recipient console. I'm going to just drag that over here and let go. And then I'm going to say that we want to make this a workbench view. And there are 2 alarm consoles, just to remind everybody. You already know this probably. The AX, which we don't want. We want the alarm console, which is the responsive one. And when I say OK, that will render out a new alarm console in responsive mode. So what's kind of cool is here we have a widget that automatically expands and contracts, gives more information, goes to double lines when the screen size is too small. So now I have an alarm PX page that I can view in multiple sizes. Okay. Pretty simple. The only thing, like I said, is you have to get used to dicing up your page into these little blocks so that they can move around. And then you have to remember, this is my new line, my new row, and then these will follow. So they will not form a new line. This forms a new line. This forms a new line, a breakpoint, right? And then you don't have to do anything special for the widgets for the alarm console. So to take a look at how this works then in different sizes, I'll show you a little trick that you can do in Chrome. So let me come back to my examples here. And here's my alarms. I'm not going to save that. Here's my finished alarm console. So we can test it out just in Workbench just by dragging that out. But most likely you want to see what that would look like on an iPhone, right? So Chrome has a really nice feature. I think I have to share Chrome. I have to say share Chrome. So now can you see Chrome? Yes. So now you can see Chrome. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use a special Chrome feature that allows me to bring up some developer tools. And part of that developer tools is to show what things will look like responsively. So the big thing you have to know there is this little toggle device toolbar. Once that's on, and it usually is on by default, now Chrome will act as I have it set up. So right now it's in responsive mode. So as I shrink the pane, it will automatically relay out those. It's a little slow there. Relay out those components in that responsive form. It even mimics the finger on the touch display. Okay. Well, if I want to go in and look on a specific device, here's an iPhone SE. This is what this page would look like on an iPhone SE and how it would behave. So it gives you. Oh, am I going too fast? Okay. So this will allow us to then look at how this will display on the iPhone 5S, 5 or SE. If I want to go to a plus, we'll go to a 6, 7, and 8 plus. And again, the resolution on those devices is pretty high, so Chrome will scale it down to fit all the pixels in, but this is what it would look like on a 6 Plus. And what's even nice is I can click this rotation, and it will flip it into the landscape mode. And we can see in landscape, I can actually fit 2 of the blocks side by side, and then the third one fills underneath. Okay. I can go ahead and click on, I'm going to create some major havoc here so you can see some alarms. So I'm changing the color of that menu bar, and down here we can see that we have some alarms that we can acknowledge. And again, this is all responsive so that it will fit on any size screen that I pass to it. So let's go look at it on a iPad. Here's an iPad. Now, again, the text won't be small on the iPad, but in Chrome on my tiny little laptop here, in order to display what it would look like, it actually has to shrink it down. On an iPad, it will be at 100%, but in Chrome, it's just kind of shrinking it down so it can show me the entire view of what that will appear on the iPad. Okay, so that's just a little bit of responsive panes, how to create a responsive pane. Like I said, we'll have a tutorial up that will allow us to go through this step by step. So you don't have to, I should have probably told you that before you're taking notes. But what I want to do now is I want to show you real quick, and then I'm going to open it up for Logan to show you a new tool. I'm going to show you another station where I have, again, responsive running. And a couple things. If I go to a mechanical, remember how I said we can set that max and min scale? Here is a mechanical that's running. You can't see it? Can't see it. Share my, oh, there it is. Now you can see it. Here's this mechanical. So as I shrink this down, the max and min, so notice the scroll bar show up. Remember the root is the scroll pane? That's what this is for, right? So I have this single graphic that's automatically told to don't enlarge more than 1 and don't go down, don't shrink down to more than 0.75. So it actually lets you use that graphic, especially if it's this complicated, on a small screen, but it will give you the ability to scroll. So this is super helpful when you're trying to use some of these mechanics. I've seen some of these on phones shrink down so small that you can't even read the text. So that gives you that capability of stopping it. And also one other point is I'm going to cause an analytic error here. I'm going to cause the comfort of our room here. I'm going to cram all of you into this conference room, and we're going to cause the, oops, I'm going the wrong way, the CO2 level to rise in this room. What's neat about the responsive is you can get really clever with the visible pane. So here's a responsive block that will only show up when there's an error or when the air quality is poor. So it's now visible. The CO2 level of the room has risen. If I go back down into normal levels, that will go back to green, and then it disappears. So you can do some pretty cool things with the responsive panes just using the animation on visible. So with that, I'm going to allow Logan to share his computer because he's going to show you a really cool tool that you should know about.
All right. Hi, everyone. Share. Okay. So you may have a station that is currently full up of existing graphics that are they're statically positioned and they have a set height and width, like maybe they're 800 by 600 or they're 1024 by 768, whatever. But the scaling isn't necessarily set up on all of your graphics. And you may want to just go through your entire set of graphics and add some responsive capabilities to them automatically. So to do that, we provide this tool. It is in the PX Editor palette, and it's called a responsive migration, and it's actually a program object. So in order to use this, I'm going to drag it into my running station, put it in the program service here. And there are a couple views that I can look at here. The first I'm going to show is the program editor. And in the program editor, you can see the source code of it, and you can see all of the documentation about it. So it'll give you a lot of details about what the individual options are when you run it. when you just look at the property sheet for this program object, you can see a number of different properties here. And what these are is they configure how this program object is going to go through your existing graphics and add responsive capabilities to them. So what it will do is it's a little bit limited. It's going to take your graphics that are already based on a canvas pane, and it's going to do a couple things like wrap them in a scroll pane, which will enable the scaling. It will add things like the min scale and the max scale, and you can specify what those are. They may take a little bit of experimentation to find the right values that work for your own graphics. And you can specify uh, which directory, like which PX files that you're going to process, and you can also filter based on a certain file path. But at the end of the day, what this is going to do is it'll take your graphics and make the necessary changes so that they can they can scale more nicely up and down on different size devices. There are two different actions that you can invoke on this program object. There is execute, but before you execute, you want to do a dry run. And what the dry run will do is it will actually go through, and you can see in the background, it will print sort of a report of exactly what changes it's going to make to your PX graphics, so that you can see what it's going to do before it actually does it. Of course, we recommend that you back up all of your PX files to a safe place before you run any kind of program that will make changes to them. But after you do so, your PX graphics should automatically all scale more nicely up or down to fit different device sizes.
That's pretty cool. So this, I would run this tool against a station that I'm migrating to 4.6 so that I can take advantage of minimally, at least the max and min scale of responsive.
That's right.
Excellent. Excellent. So that will go through and change all of my PX pages that it encounters. You can tell I'm a sales guy. So I think we'll open it up for Q&A. All right. Let's see. What version of Niagara is this required for this? Oh, you already answered that? Oh, okay. So 4.6 is where the responsive pane lives. So anything that you bring from the earlier versions, we can run through the tool to apply the max min and the scale factor to get them set up for responsiveness, but 4.6 is what you need for the actual responsive PX page. Does all the service widgets available under services, are they supported by responsive pane?
I can answer that one. If they have existing web views already, then those web views will be supported. Not all of the existing web views for all of the services are themselves responsive. So they may or may not scale down individually themselves. But anything that you can add to a PX graphic will also be, it will work under a responsive pane. I have a question. The HXPX view bar and the web browser tab show up when we look at it on mobile. How can we hide those? So to hide the view bar, depending on which profile you're in, you could choose a different HX profile. I can't remember exactly which one, but it might be basic or handheld. But there are different HX profiles that you could assign to your user that would have either a smaller or maybe no view bar. In order to hide the web browser tabs, there's not a way that the view itself could do it, but you can, like on a desktop, you can hit F11 to go full screen, and that will hide the tabs. Not sure about I think the tab should automatically disappear on a phone screen. What about responsive menus? Here's the next question. Could buttons collapse into a drop-down menu, for example? At the moment, I don't think we have any responsive menus or button groups, but I will take a note of that, and we could look at adding those in a future version. Can you make a standard graphic responsive, i.e. VAV, AHU, RTU? Yes, if they are based on a canvas pane. If the canvas pane is already inside a scroll pane, then all you need to do is specify what you want the min and max scale factors to be, and then it will automatically scale up or down to fit different phone sizes. And if they're not, you could just wrap it in a scroll pane, and that
Yes.
that program object.
Make me presenter, and I can show that
Yep.
again. Make
So,
me presenter. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, so I'm going to go back to this because I did that exact same
There we go.
question here. So let me share my Niagara workbench. So in this workbench, or in this PX page, I have a mechanical. So this is a mechanical of a rooftop unit. Okay. What I've done, if we take a look at how we break this up, is I've created little blocks for certain supply temperatures, outside temperature, any kind of diagnostic data that I'd want to see. I created a compressor on its own, essentially its own block, so it can move around. And then I used the standard PX page for at VAV or whatever that you've done, but we've gone in and we've set the max scale factor to be 1, the min scale factor to be 0.75. So if you run that tool, it will do what Logan was saying, where it will change your route. Somebody's fighting with my mouse. So it will go and change your route to a scroll, and then it will put all your content underneath that. And then all I had to do was add the flow pane and then break up the little blocks. So I have several different sizes, but when I go and scale this, right, that max and min will stop on the graphic, but everything else starts to flow. So you can see that these blocks flowed. This stopped, gave me that max and min. If I take that away, if I go and set those max and mins to 0, right, just to show you, 0, 0. So I'm saying, yep, take it all the way down and it's fit. This is where I was telling you that now that same graphic, it will shrink so small, even though it fits on that display correctly. It's just I can't read those numbers, right? And I guess I can pinch to zoom to be technical, but it gives you some more control of taking that existing content and putting it into responsive. We have time for another question.
We have many questions.
This is great.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see what you guys do with this. The questions are really good.
I saw a number of questions about the migration tool. I'll try and wrap those up as many as I can. The migration tool is a program object under the PX editor palette. So if you just add that to your station, you can run it from there. And if you look at that program object in the program editor, you can see all the documentation about it. Questions about which widgets can be made responsive. Any widget that you can put onto a canvas pane will scale up or down along with the canvas pane itself, meaning the scaling is part of canvas pane. So any widgets that are on that canvas pane, including labels, pictures, images, anything that goes on that canvas pane will scale. Again, same with PX includes. If it goes on a canvas pane, it'll scale up and down just fine.
And look, here's a schedule, responsive schedule. We've only been asking for that.
Yeah. Documentation is going up.
URL docs.com. That's where all the Tridium Resource Center. That's what URL is called. Yep. Which requires a Niagara community login. But we've moved our documentation online so that we can continue to update it and put in examples. So definitely visit docs.tridium.com. So I think we summarized those questions. Again, I want to thank you for attending. This has been a pretty exciting update to 4.6. I know that people have been asking for mobile-friendly pages, so I'm pretty excited. I'm dying to see what you guys put together. So you saw a little bit of what I was working on with some of the blocks. Just remember, think small and then work your way up to the larger sizes. So you need to figure out what that minimum size screen is. So I just picked a 5S, although you probably don't get that anymore, but that's the way to go. So again, thank you for attending. We will post the recording. Actually, I think I have a PowerPoint slide for that, right? So we came prepared and I almost missed it, right? So we were in the Q&A. So at www.tridium.com resources events, we will have a recording of this webinar. Also check out our training site. We're going to put up a tutorial on this exact topic. Again, thank you for attending. You can leave feedback once the seminar ends, so we can take a look at what you thought of this webinar and maybe future webinars that you'd like to see. Our next one, which you should watch for in a few weeks, will be on bulk deploy. So there's a little plug for the next one. And again, thank you for attending.